We never chose war. We were asleep. We didn't want this. You woke us up. Mm-hmm. But here's the thing: if our land's pain wakes us up, we'll never go to sleep again. And I think that the reason why Shiite mentality has resonated with us is because we're anti-justice, but at the same time we're pro-survival.
Anti-justice?
Anti-injustice, sorry. Now they're going to say, oh, this is a Freudian slip. Jesus Christ. Morality police vans were becoming a national security threat.
Are they still there?
Apparently not.
That's why I asked you the question. After Mahsa Amini, I think there has been a reassessment regarding that issue.
Oh, absolutely. And credit where credit's due. I actually think the government did provide an anti-colonial response during the 12-day war that we had. It provided a lot of pride. It resonated with people.
I saw a tweet where somebody wrote to you, Nassim, are you aware that the day after the overthrow, I will shave your head and force you to wash my motorcycle every day in a bikini while you memorize the Israeli national anthem?
Check the funding. Check the funding of people that are calling for regime change. It's that simple. Like, I'm not rosy when Palestine is discussed, but one of my friends during the war, I told him, are you hopeful? And about the end of this war, and he said, I'm determined. And I really liked that.
What does resistance look like today? And how do Iran and the ongoing genocide in Palestine fit into this global picture? These questions and more will be explored with the accomplished professor Nassim Noroozi. Her research focuses on the ethics of resistance within today's colonial realities. She lectures at Concordia University's Simone de Beauvoir Institute and at McGill University's Faculty of Education. Professor Noroozi has published many articles, including Pedagogy as Justice in Educational Theory, in Decolonial Philosophy and Education in the Oxford Research Encyclopedia of Education. Join us on All Podcasts today as we dive deep into these urgent issues with our esteemed guest. Welcome, Professor.
Thank you very much for having me.
Okay, let's start.
I
remember our first conversation. You asked why my words about Iran came with so many caveats.
Yeah.
That question stuck with me, honestly. And I'm still thinking about it, by the way. And made me think, could colonization be not just about borders and arms, but also about controlling speech? What do you think about that?
Yes, well, thank you for having me, and thank you for bringing that up, because I was frustrated with even seeing a lot of leftist activists saying, yes, the Iranian regime is like this, but... So they had to sort of like justify the fact that they were anti-war. So I was tired at this time, so I said, you don't need to bring any caveats. Like it's we don't need that. But yeah, I think our speech and our imagination about social and political change is very much affected by colonization, and that's a classic example of us needing to bring a lot of caveats, even as people that are anti-war. I'll give you an example, regime change, right? And I'm pretty sure we're going to come back to it during our interview. But if I would tell you right now, and I think this was in our conversation, it was at the gym, I went there after like 14 days of staying at home, just like posting stuff. If because of the problem of the missing and murdered Indigenous women, or if because of the lack of access to water for the Indigenous nations, which is a basic human rights issue.
We're talking in Canada.
In Canada. If I would come to you, or you would come to me, and you would say, we should call for a regime change in Canada with the support of Russia, right? Because I want to try to make it a little bit similar. It will never be, because the context is different. But if because of that I would say we should do regime change, what would your reaction be? You would be shocked, right? You're like, what do you mean regime?
That's pretty insane.
That's only for, countries over there, exactly. So even the idea of regime change, which is a military intervention by the help of another country who's often your rival in the global sphere or in the regional area, or as a regional rival. Yeah, this is, regime change is super problematic, but you see it in mainstream media as if it's like the solution. And that is how colonization affects our imagination of political change or social change for other countries.
And my second question is, could it shape how we understand and analyze current events? And the reason I'm asking this is because when I thought about your question, I started thinking, and why did I put so many caveats? Why did I proceed with such caution when I mentioned Iran or Lebanon or Palestine? And I started rethinking, when I was younger, when I was brought up in high school or CEGEP or in university, what my teachers would teach me. And for example, if I recall, when they would mention Malcolm X would be the bad guy. But Martin Luther King would be the good guy. Because why? Because he didn't take up arms. So Malcolm X bothered them. But did he bother them because he was a bad guy, or he bothered them because he was different than Martin Luther King? Same thing. I remember my philosophy teacher in CEGEP. It reminds me of you, but you're younger. So, she used to talk a lot about Gandhi and the peaceful revolution in India. And so I started remembering those examples, and I'm like, okay, those seeds were put into me when I was very, very young to focus on what is actual good resistance and what is bad resistance. So I wanted your comment on that.
Very interesting. I have an answer to your original question, but I want to talk about the question you mentioned about peace. I just heard 80% of the Palestinian resistance is actually peaceful. And we know that Israel, one of the tactics that it has is to radicalize peaceful resistance, to make you go to the edge, to commit violence, and then they're going to label you as terrorists. So I think there is a very interesting and malicious but dynamic within the whole notion of peace. So we need to be careful of that. At least we need to be cognizant of what we're being offered. Iran was very peaceful towards Israel militarily until they really took it to the extreme and killed the commanders. And then it was like, all right, no, I'm sorry, we're not doing this anymore. So
not just commanders, their
families, and after that we saw the civilians and everything. But even the commanders, I'm not shy to bring up the fact that, well, the commanders were not during war; they were asleep during peace. No one has the right to do that, and for someone to do that and still have this impunity is messed up. And I'm going to talk about this because the idea of cognitive imperialism, through what you studied, and I'm not an expert on Malcolm X. I wish I was, but I'm not. So, it's amazing to talk about Gandhi and how the Zionist movement wanted to co-opt Gandhi, and then he backed out. So he was very aware. So the contexts are different. But yes, the dynamic of peace is something very interesting. But the fact that I think, if you ask me, why do we see the world the way we see it? I say it's probably because we've been numbed, and I'm working on this numbness for a while in my research. We've been numbed that we're carrying ourselves in this world with cognitive imperialism. And that's a very important concept that I often talk about in my classes as well.
Please repeat the term.
Cognitive imperialism. It looks very big. It's by the amazing educational theorist Mary Baptiste, who is a Mi'kmaq educational. I would call her a philosopher, and it looks very smart, but essentially, and I'm going to, for the sake of our discussion, it's basically about one part of the world is where progress happens, change happens, democracy, peace, stability, technology, science. It's happening. And the rest of the world is stagnant, nothing is happening. It doesn't have democracy. It's almost dark. So I think because we're carrying ourselves with this notion of cognitive imperialism, is that we become numb when someone says, someone comes at the podium and says, we need to free that nation because of the human rights abuses. It's because we're carrying ourselves with this idea that, okay, things are happening here, things must be good, things must be bad there. So sure, why not? So there's a very strategic numbness that's happening through this, through our understanding of the world. And no one asks, hey, who's benefiting from this whole thing? U.S. never, I read somewhere, and I think it's very interesting, the U.S. never wins wars. It just like sows chaos, right? So you have to look beyond the podium, which is like the weapons manufacturing companies. You have to see their stock, the value of them rises. And we don't do it because we carry cognitive imperialist tendencies in our thought. And I was one of them too. Like, it's not like I'm not scolding anybody. I always say, I know it inside out because I was a cognitive imperialist. So that's something to be thinking about. And I'm going to talk about this more, about this idea of... I'm
just going to touch on two things you mentioned. The first one would be, you said 80% of the Palestinian resistance is peaceful, right?
Was peaceful, has been peaceful.
Has been peaceful,
yeah.
okay.
Yeah.
And you mentioned the Iranian commanders that died, that were peaceful, that weren't doing anything, they were sleeping in their houses, that were killed and bombed by the Israelis with obvious U.S. help. I wanted to ask you is, why did you use the term radicalized in a sense where whoever actually committed the crime of killing those Iranian generals was the person that actually did the act that's radical.
The terrorism.
The terrorist act. So I find it, like, it's, maybe you didn't even notice, but what I'm trying to say, I find it funny that you used radicalized for the person that actually responded to the radical act.
Totally. Let me open that a little bit, because I'm not using the language of the colonizer here. What I'm mentioning is that when Netanyahu says that Hamas is a radicalized Islamic terrorist organization, it was Israel that radicalized this. So I'm using the language in order to dismantle the terminology here. Yahya Sinwar was the leader of peaceful marches after having spent 23 years, if I'm not mistaken, in Israeli jails. And they shot at those marches, and then we saw the things that we saw. So even the term radicalization, if someone wants to use it, it's the making of Israel. So we need to be mindful of that. So I'm not using it in order to say that they were radical. And in philosophy, radical also has a different meaning, which means exhaustive. So it means like you have to look at a topic from everything. So it's like a radical look. It doesn't mean, extremist. It actually means
it just implies that these people are, for example, Muslim in this case, though that means that they're radical and their action is, logically speaking, extreme. So that's why I'm saying that these people are actually peaceful, and you do something radical to them, and their response is to respond to basically your radical behavior. If you think that's radicalized, well, don't do something radical to provoke me.
Exactly. That's hence the whole point that I think we should not give up the domain of words to the people who are using them. Like, one of the things I really like from some of the great anti-Zionist Jewish activists is this: they're actually turning the terminologies back to Israel. So they're like, you are the savage. Because what you're doing is pretty savage. So this is a tactic that I also really like.
And the second point was, the reason I mentioned Malcolm X and Gandhi was not to discuss those two people. It's actually is to bring me back when I was younger. When did it start? When did the colonization start? That's what I wanted to know. And I was wondering if you ever came across something that actually delved into that, or did your research answer that question?
Well, my research, I work on the responses to colonization. And one of the major responses that I examine is and it might be a little bit off topic from your question, but I think I'm going to try and land the point back.
It's a long format podcast. So
Yeah.
take your time. Don't worry about it.
One of the things that I do is I look at Eurocentric resistance as a response to colonial violence and colonial subjugation. And I'll tell you what I mean. Eurocentric doesn't mean European. Eurocentrism means that you by default and without examining think that the thought, the art, the music, the cinema, the philosophy, anything that has been created in Europe or North America is by default good, unquestionably, without examination, is the thing that can be applied for everywhere. So it's a very problematic look. I mean, imagine if I would say the art that is in Iran would be good for everywhere. Everybody should do it. So it's a very troubling mode of thinking. It's a type of ignorance, but it's very common. What I really like, this is a juicy part of my research, where I look at how Eurocentrism, wanting to become like someone who has discarded you, has attacked you, or has committed an aggression against you, has made you go through famine, which is Britain with respect to Iran. You want to become like that. And I think this is not to be scolded, but to be examined.
Just to stop you.
Yeah.
When did that happen?
I don't know the date exactly, but I think it was a few decades ago. That was like 2.5 million people died in Iran because of British. I don't remember that, but I'll look it up,
Okay.
or maybe you can write it down somewhere in the explanation of the podcast. But yes, we had a British-induced famine in Iran. But the whole point of Eurocentric resistance is that we see it in our school, we see it in our curriculum, we see it in art. What I really find the way I look at it, and the reason why I find it fascinating, is that you feel like by becoming a person who has colonized you, then you will be able to overcome the traumatic situation of colonization. And I'll give you an example.
Okay.
Eurocentrism is the way we look at the world in Iran, right? And that's why opposition channels are very successful, because, there's a guy with a tie, and I always focus on the optics. Because, the other one you've seen, for example, the Iranian TV, it's always like with, fully covered hijab. And then, Eurocentric people don't like that. So, that's why.
In Lebanon, we say Franji Branji, which
Franji
means Branji, meaning that everything that comes from that side of the world, which is Europe, French and whatnot, is so much better.
There you go. This is yours. Exactly. So, and one of the examples that I often find, it skips the radar of our attention is Cannes Festival movies that are like the Iranian movies. I don't know if you've ever watched them. It is an embodiment of making a movie for the white civilized world that is, by the way, sending weapons to Israel so that Israel can, attack us. Yeah. And the definition of sublime art or a sublime movie is when it has made it to Cannes. And guess what type of, or even the Oscars, and guess what type of movie goes to the Oscars or Cannes? Have you seen comedy movies, or it's always drama? Or almost always from the Middle East, or
It's always drama.
It's always drama, and it's kind of like it's like quenching the thirst of this Westerner who hasn't traveled there, and seeing like layers and layers of drama. There's an accident, and then there is like someone has cancer, and then someone is poor. All of it is an amalgamation of all of these together. It's sort of like quenches this fetish of like, all right, through these things I can have an understanding of how first of all, thank you for picturing it so that you can quench my thirst. All of the movies of Cannes are sadly, following this, we call them festival movies, right?
They're
never made. Comedies don't make it there because comedies are existentialists. They're kind of like, there's a problem, we need to deal with it, we need to overcome it. But all of these are like layers and layers with open-ended parts where somebody is really like angry. You know, it's betrayal, it's poverty, it's cancer, it's a progressive disease.
It's as if our societies don't know how to laugh.
Yes, yeah. And it's exactly, but also there is an element to it that I find really, the more miserable you portray it, the more you're making me feel like, you know, I'm good and where I'm sitting is good. Mm-hmm. And I feel good about myself. And also like it's like a report that I want to see about how bad the East is. Right? And well done. This is like a very picturesque report. Thank you, right? It's never comedies. Even like with the case of South Korea with the Parasite movie, I suffered through that movie. I don't know if you've watched it. Won Oscars, and then all the white colleagues of mine were going crazy for it. And I was like, all right, I need to watch this. It's a torture, like a psychological torture. And a lot of people were like, oh, this is like portraying capitalism. No, it's Orientalism. You are right now feeding into this loop of dramas because it is making you feel, now I have an understanding of the society because I see all the miseries. So yeah.
I have a segment just for that because following a post you made on Instagram maybe 2 days ago.
Yeah.
But I'm just going to continue on the subject of colonization.
Yeah.
We're almost done that part. Basically, you also discussed in one of your articles the restitution of questioning and decolonization.
Yes.
You talked about new ways of colonization. So you wrote actually, whether abandoning a peace deal like the JCPOA nuclear deal, which lifted sanctions on Iran, was a continuation of the breaking of treaties that were signed between the colonizer and the colonized. So is that a new way of basically colonizing people?
Thank you for reading the articles and watching my stuff. That's really that's all an academic wants from life. I mentioned in a recent interview that I had that no, it's a classical thing. It's almost as if treaties are made to be broken, and they are written to be dishonored later on. Whereas the colonized constantly calls for their for upholding the treaties. We see it in Canada here too. You ask Indigenous leaders or theorists, what do you want? Like, uphold the treaties. So no, it's a classic case. Although there is a little nuance there that I do want to touch on. I always say that it's too late to decolonize for some people, for some nations. And the way, if you're cognizant of this idea that treaties are written to be broken, then outsmarting the narrative of the colonizer would be the way to go. And an example that I gave was about one of the Iranian commanders that was martyred and killed in, what day was that? Feels like a year right now, but about 2 weeks ago, and he started posting videos without his uniform and talking about peace. I don't know if you've seen that, but then that really made a great shift in the paradigm of commanders, like no uniform, talking about peace, talking about good relationship with your neighbors. And I recorded a talk with my friend a month and a half ago. So I think it was, or 2 months ago. So it was like a month before his assassination. And I said, this is a decolonial act. This is the ultimate decolonial act because treaties are written to be broken. So what you can do is you can outsmart the colonizer in their narratives that are shaping. So everybody portrayed Iranian commanders as warmongering, violent people. And then here we had this commander who took off his uniform and started talking about peace. So
and was still martyred, though.
Of course.
Exactly.
But that what happened though was what was fascinating was that the compass of the collective cognitive compass shifted. So when he was martyred, he was no longer, by a lot of people, he was no longer, oh, that commander who always talks about, attacking others. He was our commander because he called for peace. And actually, I think that video is to be studied for years to come.
What's the name of the commander?
Bagheri.
Bagheri?
Yeah, and if you put this on Instagram, GH, if you put his name, your video will be taken off Instagram. That's what happened to me. So in the world where treaties aren't written to be broken,
do you think that we should outsmart the colonizer?
Yes. And I also think that treaties can outsmart the colonizer, and the JCPOA was an example of that. But then it was not tolerated. So
okay. This takes us to part two.
Yeah.
When there's colonization, there's resistance.
Yes.
There's different ways to resist.
Yes.
You named Mr. Bagheri.
Yes.
That's his way to resist.
Yes.
And for example, the supreme leader of Iran, his way of resistance was saying that what you guys voted for the left in Iran, or the Islahiyin, I forgot the term.
The reformists.
The reformists.
Yeah.
You guys want to negotiate with the US.
Yes.
But I think that this is going to lead to nowhere.
Yeah.
And it actually led to nowhere. It led to a war.
Yeah.
That's his form of resistance, right? So considering you opened that Pandora box, what are the major theories developed in response to injustice and resistance?
Yeah. The fact that, let me just answer one thing and then I'll go to...
Go ahead.
The fact that Iranians voted for diplomacy, they voted for negotiations, and they voted for normalization of ties and, relationships with the West we would be remiss if we do not take that into the consideration of how that made the narrative of Iran being the victim as legitimate. We never chose war. We never chose not talking to the West or not normalizing. Iranians were at the table of negotiations when this happened. So that vote, which I stand firmly by, actually pissed off the warmongers inside of Iran, which hide themselves under the rhetoric of anti-colonial resistance. That's a very interesting discussion too, because they're sanctions beneficiaries, or because they're just really haven't thought that, okay, what if this 12-day war would have continued on, right? So the fact that we voted for that was pivotal in shifting the narrative and outsmarting the narrative of the satellite channels that were Iranians. And we worked really hard. I was one of the people that was heavily smeared because of campaigning really hard to vote for this president. And I was very upset when the leader said...
Mr. Pezeshkian,
And I was very upset when the supreme leader said, no, we're not going to do negotiations. I was like, no, here I am saying overthrowism is not the thing, and we need to do reforms, and then we voted.
But don't you?
But I also think that it was that discussion made me go and look at Trump's memo, and Trump's memo was really disrespectful. So I was like, no, I understand what the position he's taking, and I like the back and forth. I like the Democratic part saying, yes, and then the leader saying no, because based on experience, we've been duped many times.
But also, I'm interrupting you, but it's good that we opened that subject.
Yeah.
Is that the supreme leader said no, but yet he let the process go, and that's something very important.
Absolutely.
So there is a dynamic.
There is an agency exactly
a vibrant society in Iran where people have different opinions, and you can say, okay, the majority voted for this. Okay, let's try this. But my opinion is that this is going to lead to X, and let's try it out. Hopefully, it will work. In this case, it didn't work. Okay, now let's see what we can as a society do.
Totally. And again, thinking of how the back and forth, which, the current president is very much in line with the rest of the Iranian establishment, and that is point of strength, I find. He's not picking fights while others are. So I actually think, again, we voted like there's a reel I posted on Instagram that said we were asleep. We didn't want this. You woke us up. Mm-hmm. But here's the thing: if our land's pain wakes us up, we'll never go to sleep again, right? So I'm pretty sure I want to reach out to this guy and say, did you vote for the guy that I voted for? Because my sentiments shifted after the attack, and I was like, I am behind the military right now, no questions about it, even though I consistently vote against their presence in the civil sphere, which I think still it's a very important thing to have different fractions. Mm-hmm. But yeah, I think that the leaders' points are something to be studied, and the back and forth. There was a dialectical movement going on. It was not something that, oh, no, and that's it. No, but I'm going to give you the green light, go ahead. But I want people to know that this is my diagnostic of the situation. So yeah.
Because in the West, Iran is portrayed as a society which works like, for example, a Stalin.
Yes.
A Stalin, not government, but a Stalin, someone with like, I'm at loss of
especially
words.
Like the optics.
Exactly.
Right?
Exactly. So somebody like Stalin, you do this and you don't do that. Yes. So I feel like we neglect it in the West, especially to discuss that there's this vibrant democracy in Iran, and people actually, like every society, it can be improved, but actually people can say no to the supreme leader if there's the good majority that can actually.
And if you say it, and the past decades of us voting has shown us one thing, that if you say it through the ballot box, then it will be listened to. And if you show it on the streets as a sign of like siding with the outside forces, if it can be interpreted as such, and it can sometimes be, and it is interpreted, and it is at some points, then it's a no. So I actually think that practicing agency for Iranians through voting has been heavily invested onto sort of the sanctioning it and boycotting it in order to further solidify the image that you're talking about, like the Stalinistic sort of.
Stalinistic, that's the word I was looking
point.
For.
So don't vote so that this image will be reified and solidified further, so that we can wage a war against Iran. So you can imagine the number of smears we get from the overthrowists when we say, hey, don't give up the practice and agency of practicing your democratic rights. And they're like, no, and the number of death threats that I receive because of calling people to vote should tell you something about cognitive imperialistic tendencies that we have. No, because we want to show this system as closed, and yes, it has a lot of problems. Are you kidding me? But which place doesn't?
Exactly.
US, the gerrymandering, electoral college being built on stolen land, a democracy that is built on stolen land, Canada.
But just the electoral college, I mean, using the example of Bernie Sanders and Hillary Clinton, for example.
Yeah.
I mean, you could see the population, the Democratic, were leaning towards Bernie Sanders, but the establishment decided to go with Hillary Clinton.
So Guardian Councils exist.
Exactly.
They only change their format. And by the way, we vote for the Guardian Council. Yes, there are loopholes in it, but we vote for who goes on the Guardian Council. And it is because we didn't vote that people that I didn't like didn't go to the Guardian Council. So taking away the democratic agency from people by constantly wanting to reify the optics of this government being this XYZ eventually leads to radicalization, which we talked about before.
We'll delve into that subject more deeply in the third part. However, considering I asked the question, because I want to talk about its practical challenges. So let's talk about the major theories developed in response to injustice. Can I mention
before just 2 points, because I'm going to feel,
it's fine.
I'm going to sulk if I don't mention it. I talked about Eurocentric resistance, Mustafa, and I also want to mention how you cannot overcome Eurocentrism like this. It's a process of unlearning. You have to unlearn so many layers. You cannot be non-Eurocentric from the beginning. The world is Eurocentric. So that's why we need to be patient with a lot of pro-war Iranians.
It's interesting that you said that.
Yeah.
What do you mean by the world is Eurocentric?
The world.
No, I know. But what do you mean?
The world,
as in Professor Nassim and Mustafa, sitting down in Canada, or
No,
somebody sitting
mainstream
in Beijing,
narrative.
for example?
Yeah.
Does he see it from a Eurocentric world?
I actually think that the majority
Isn't
of
that
intellectuals
a Eurocentric
it can be
thing to say?
Orientalist, but no, I think the majority of us intellectuals.
Did you see the point I was trying to make?
But the majority of us intellectuals are Eurocentric because we assume that the sublime knowledge is in the hand of the white man, right? And then you overcome it, you unlearn it, you undo the learning. So chances are an intellectual in Beijing or Nassim in Canada has learned to unlearn their Eurocentrism. And, I always say to my religious friends, Iranian friends, I say, you have an edge over us because your religious tendencies allows you to see BS as BS. Whereas me, I was born into watching Friends sitcoms. I was born into like valuing a life of like Rachel and Phoebe and Ross. I don't want to like Friends is banned forever and was, and now because of David Schwimmer, it's, but we're born into it, right? So I'm not generalizing, but I'm talking about a pathology here. And this is not me, it's Fanon. Fanon says the biggest problem for the white man, for the black man, is that he wants to become white. And the reason why I'm focusing on this is that it's a journey. It's not a moment that can happen.
You mean overcoming Eurocentrism?
Exactly, yes.
It's funny that you mentioned Fanon. You've got Ali Shariati.
Yeah.
He wrote in his book, Return to Self, the West has been trying since the 18th century with the help of sociologists, historians, writers, artists, and even its revolutionaries to impose the following theory on the world. Civilization is one, and it is the one the West has built and offered to the world. Anyone who wants to be civilized must necessarily adopt the civilization that the West has created for them.
Actually, this ties in very nicely with your fourth question on anti-colonial, on the struggles and dilemmas of that these theories face. And I gave it away. I wanted to talk about.
That's fine. That's why I brought it up.
Yeah.
Because you said Fanon, and I will bring somebody that you know maybe.
So the juicy part of my research is on how anti-colonial resistance is received, and the rhetoric of it is received inside of Iran. When it becomes the official government rhetoric, imagine what would the Eurocentric people do? Like, it's a complete alienation, right? So I study that as well, the sort of like modes of alienation that Iranians have towards Shariati or Jalal al-Ahmad. When it becomes the official rhetoric, it loses its epistemic value. It loses its like thinking value, because you're like, all right, the person that is doing injustice to me is talking about these people, and I see. So then you start having an alienation procedure from critical thinking here. So I'm going to come back to Shariati, but then the responsibility here is for the government when they adopt a rhetoric to make sure that they fully deliver on the messages of it, and don't create like morality police here and there, and really commit to an anti-colonial struggle. And I credit where credit's due. I actually think the government did provide an anti-colonial response during the 12-day war that we had. It provided a lot of pride. It resonated with people. It was a tectonic shift. But there's something common about Shariati and other Iranian, and I know people love Shariati. I know the left loves Shariati outside. The white left likes it.
Shariati, let's talk about him. Like, why do you think they love him?
Who? Outsiders?
Outsiders and inside of Iran.
So I was heavily influenced by Shariati, okay? So cards on the table. But a lot of people are not.
I'll stop you there.
Yeah.
Because first of all, he looks different.
Yeah.
He's not Imam.
He's wearing the tie.
Not only the tie, he's shaved. He's not Ayatollah Khomeini, for example.
Yeah.
He's totally different.
Yeah.
But he comes from a similar background, right? So is it because he was killed or murdered, or we don't know what happened exactly
no,
1979, or because he looked different? What is it?
Why it's resonated?
Exactly.
I think it's not resonating with a lot of Eurocentric people still. And there's a reason for it. Since we're talking about Eurocentrism, and since we're talking about overcoming Eurocentrism, I think I've always mentioned that there are 3 crucial factors for overcoming Eurocentrism. Number 1, for Eurocentric people, okay? Not for the religious people who, again, already have an edge in recognizing BS.
Why do you say that?
Well, because they're not necessarily... they're not impressed by the tie or by the attire of the West. So when they see a movie that they don't like, it's like, oh, this is really bad. I don't care if it won the Cannes. It's not a movie that I would like to watch. So I always say they can recognize something that is presented as sublime, and it's not, and they can recognize it, they can call it out. I have it amongst my religious friends who are like, that doesn't inspire me or impress me. Whereas every other Eurocentric friend that I have, they go crazy for whoever is, whatever movie that is winning the Oscars, like it's capturing the white gaze, as we call it, right? But 3 things for Shiite and other people. They've traveled to the West. They undid and unlearned their Eurocentrism. So they were faced with critical literature, and they had the geographical relocation, and they had the time, and they had exposure to good people. And Iranians don't have that inside of Iran. So that's why it doesn't, for a lot of Iranians inside of Iran, it doesn't resonate with them when they read Shariati. In fact, they resist it. I was in we talk about the dilemmas that these theories face.
It's because it's interesting that you say that it doesn't resonate. So I want to hear you basically.
I went to the philosophy department of my alma mater in Tehran, and which is called Tehran University. Love it forever. I asked my colleague, can I sit in one of her classes? And it was a graduate class. I never forget it. And there were these 2 people, young folks wearing like modern, stuff. They had gotten their PhDs from Holland, the Netherlands, if I'm not mistaken. And the professor had called them as guest speakers. Guess what they were talking about? Shariati and Jalal al-Ahmad, right? The Westoxification and all of these things. And I never forget the apathetic look of people. They were like, are they crazy? And then one person who was wearing a complete hijab raised her hand and said, but we all know these are so old. You come from the West, tell us something new. Whereas the cutting edge stuff are decolonial or post-colonial here. And they were like, nah, I'm living in the legacy of that, right? So we need to be mindful when we're talking about anti-colonial struggle, and we need to be understanding and very, very humble about our geographical relocation. Again, I'm talking for myself and other Eurocentric people who unlearned it through academia, through good literature, through exposure to good thinking, and then going back and saying, okay, now this is a sign of colonization, this is mental colonization, this is Eurocentrism, and etc. Because we breathe in and we exhale and inhale Eurocentrism.
If you don't mind, I see a major challenge with... It's beautiful what you're saying.
Yeah.
I see a major challenge with challenging Eurocentrism with Eurocentristic methods. Don't you see that?
Like what?
It's like you're trying to decolonize with the decolonizers' methods.
Yeah.
Do you see what I'm trying to say? Like, for example, you're saying that, like Shariati mentioned, that with the help of its sociologists and historians and writers, the West has established, for example, a way of life, a way of looking at things. Yeah. And it's like we're delving into this to be able to change the way we were colonized. And I feel like it's like a vicious circle. We're always going to come back to the fact that
someone in the West said it, and then now hence my work on dilemmas of theories that respond to injustice. Yes, I often criticize a lot the post-colonial scholars that are sitting in Columbia University, living the life in New York, receiving God knows how much salaries to say how the West is bad, and then importing that type of knowledge inside of Iran would be the cutting edge thing to do. I completely agree, but I do want to really focus on the fact that if as Eurocentric people, we hadn't experienced the geographical relocation. I mean, the reason I speak English with perhaps not a Persian accent is because I wanted to become like the white man, not even the white woman, the white man.
It's definitely.
Right? So these are...
no, I'm not saying you're speaking like a white
man.
I'm
no.
saying definitely without an
Yes, so
accent.
there, but yeah. It was an effort, right?
Yeah.
There was a lot of time.
When did you relocate here?
When I was 26, so
wow.
Yeah.
I mean, your accent?
Yes.
26?
Right? There you go.
Incredible.
See, incredible is what a Eurocentric person would say. See, I'm just bugging. I'm bugging you because of the radicalization point that you meant before, that you said before.
That means a good point.
See, I kept it well. I'm a grudge holder. No, but that's why I work on ethics of resistance. You need to unpack these things.
So it comes back to one thing. So what's your source, right? You mentioned something interesting. That's why I asked you. And why doesn't it matter as much for religious people? Mm-hmm. Because what's their source, right?
Absolutely.
And that's why I want to dig deep in that. Perhaps not with you, but necessarily.
No,
but
that's
with
true.
Somebody, it's like, what's their source? So it's people would say the Quran, but I
or
would
Imam
say
Hussein's sort of like
exactly. But it's something a lot more maybe less materialistic.
Absolutely.
It's something more. Something we say here we say the heart, but in Arabic we say ruh, the soul.
Totally.
So it comes from here.
Yeah.
It's not something we touch.
Yeah.
It's something we feel. It's like it comes back to that
famous.
And
for me, having studied Persian literature was the guiding light to be able to sort of like, I knew I could fall back on something.
Exactly.
Which was incredibly rich in thinking.
But is
that
it
I could let go of this like
religion?
Ross and Phoebe lifestyle, right? I had something to go back to. It wasn't a post-colonial, the West is bad, whatever. No, I knew that there was something that was not kitsch, that was not empty. It started, like Iranian mode of thinking started as being a response to the, as a sociologist puts it very nicely, the trauma of encountering modernity, that it's sort of like, it's still responding within that trauma, and that's why it wants to become like the person that subjugated him. I think it's we're still in a PTSD mode after encountering the West. That's why it never resonates with me. Even though I like Shariati, I still think, you're trying to say, let's return to Islam. Someone else says, let's return to that. I'm like, no, let's stay here. Let's unpack this for a while.
Okay, we'll
and that's what Fanon does, right?
But I want to unpack one thing.
Yeah.
I mean, how did you work on your accent at 26 years old? Seriously.
That's a good question.
No, honestly, it's impossible. I would have thought that you came here max at 12 years old.
Yeah. My parents... they studied in the U.S., and my dad is a hardcore nationalist in terms of loving Iran. Mm-hmm. And he returned after the revolution to be a professor in Iran. So I was born in Iran. But all the political problems, he was not allowed to teach in the center, so we went to the north. And in order to make ends meet, he actually started tutoring at a formerly American school. And then once that school was sort of like, raided and people burnt the books and everything after the revolution, he took whatever he could and then created an English school. Very Eurocentric. And that was the shining light in my life, because I was like, if I see darkness, if I see bombs outside, if I see a leader that looks not like the Friends that I'm watching on sitcom, at least I can speak like them, or at least I'm studying their material. So see how delicate it is, this idea of Eurocentrism. That's why it's very juicy to sort of like think about it. And it's very confessional. I always say to my friends, confess to being Eurocentric, because it helps us with a therapy. It's like a disease that we need to overcome. It's a mental disease. So yeah.
Okay.
I studied in that school, and then
I once you got to that point, I understood initially that you came at 26 years old.
Yes.
And you spoke with an accent and you changed it. And I'm like,
I can
what
speak
kind
with
of
a Persian accent if you want. There is no problem with that.
No, that's fine. That's fine. We'll continue on the theories of resistance.
Yeah.
You worked on what you call knots in resistance.
Yes.
So what does that mean exactly?
So knots in resistance.
And knots in the sense where
K-N-O-T.
Not like...
Well, I mean, knots and then the knots to do or to not to do. One of the things that I'm trying to focus on these days is to actually remind people, well, because they don't like it when you say, let's open this knot in your knowledge of resistance, right? So it's very, very organic, the smears that happen. Some of them are very much organized, and some of them are...
That's the sound of construction.
Yeah. Some of them are organized. Some of them are by Israel or Iranian-funded opposition. But a lot of... There you go. It's knots.
Yeah, exactly. Knocks.
We're talking about knocks. But some of it is also very organic, like the response. People don't like it. And the reason is because... And I'm generalizing on purpose here. It's a very particular and deliberate generalizations. Iranians are... very anti-injustice. Okay. They take pride in that. Siding with Imam Hussein is one sign, and siding with women who are against the police brutality is another sign, right? They are anti-injustice, they take pride in it. And this kind of like general attitude towards injustice, when it becomes this predominant, and when it is this much predominant, and if it is not dissected and analyzed, it becomes very dangerous because it's co-optable by the West. The death of Mahsa Amini was an example. We were very angry, but then we realized how it sort of like started a wave that was waiting to happen, the wave of pinkwashing, creating a regime change through pinkwashing, which is through the legitimate suffering and hardship of Iranians or women in the targeted geography. So one of the knots that I look at is sort of like, look at this. Can we resist wrong? And believe it or not, the first attempt for having me fired was just because of a talk I gave on pinkwashing, where I just posed the question, can we resist wrongly? Are there wrong ways to resist? And can we harm the very people we're resisting for by the wrong form of resistance? And that is why I have 9,000 followers, but 75 million people in Iran hate me because they think that I'm with the government. Just because I questioned the stance of anti-injustice, we need to examine this. And the reason why I focus on this, first of all, it's co-optable. The other thing, it's very sad to have, it's a very contradictory stance to be this much anti-injustice, but to be this much illiterate on history and geography and politics. I was one of them. So I know the level of illiteracy that goes into trying to maintain just being angry at the local oppressing power. It's like we're zombies walking, and our stance is anti-injustice, which is beautiful. But then we don't go deeper because we're illiterate, or we don't want to be illiterate, right? We don't want to say, hey, the West is behind this, and they're like, I don't want to hear. Am I Eurocentric? Yes. Am I lazy in thinking? Maybe. But that's something that I work on in Knots of Resistance. I really look and dissect how there are wrong forms of resistance that can eventually lead to the mass suffering of Iranians.
Okay. Can we dissect a couple of points
Sure.
that you mentioned? You mentioned police brutality. And I was always confused, especially in the case of Iran, is that I can showcase cases of police brutality in Canada, in the US, in France, in England, and nobody talks about regime change. But however, as soon as it comes to Iran, it's like the reflex of the society and the whole world is no, it's because the government and the whole establishment is bad and it needs to be replaced.
Totally.
And like, for example, in Canada, Justin Trudeau, who did not stand up against the genocide in Palestine, okay,
Do you remember?
Went out when Mahsa Amini died. I'm not going to say either murdered or
no, but he died in front of.
I'm going to say that whenever the story of Mahsa Amini appeared, he went and protested for the downfall of the government of Iran.
Yeah.
And it shows the hypocrisy of the West. And I'm surprised that even people in Iran don't see that contradiction.
Hi, where do I start? That's why I study theories of resistance. Part of that has to do with the fact that Israel lobby is so strong, and it became so strong in the liberal government after Trump. They sort of like really crept their way into the government, and I could see it as someone who was examining it. So pro-Israel voices who are, in Montreal as well, they started dictating to the liberal government the procedures. And we're going to talk about women life freedom movement, because I think that was one attempt of regime change. So it wasn't that death called for regime change. Regime change was a program for Iran, and they were waiting for an opportunity for it to happen, and then they could, play all the cards, and they did play all the cards. Everything, they sort of like went from cutting their hairs as a symbolic sort of way of, I don't know if you saw the movies, like, we're going to cut our hairs. Women in European Parliament started cutting their hairs as a symbol of that. And this is what I always say Noam Chomsky calls manufacturing consent for war. Firing the ambassadors, lowering diplomatic ties. What does that mean? Do you know why they called for firing of the ambassador? I didn't know when it started. I was like, why are they doing this? And I asked a friend who studied diplomacy, and like, well, when you want to wage war against a country, you first reduce the diplomatic relations. So I was like, oh, okay, so we are in the operation regime change. So Mahsa Amini was, so they were waiting, and Mahsa Amini was something that really kind of like created the authentic anger that the West was looking for. There were a lot of incidents before it, sort of like built up. The Iranian government is equally complicit in this terrible attempt that was happening, because they didn't pick up that something is waiting to be happening outside. So I really criticized them a lot. I said, they were like, we're going to become like Syria. And I said, then don't act like Bashar Assad, So they didn't pick it up. And I see the part of the morality police continuing as part of the manufacturing of consent of war. And that needs to be studied later on. But firing the ambassadors, then the hashtag of IRGC being terrorists. And I was like, why IRGC is not on the streets? It's the what do you call them?
Morality
anti-riot police that is in the. So they're under the police. They're not under the IRGC. And I was like, what's happening? And I told my friend, called him, and I said, why are they calling for this? And then he said, well, I don't know. And I said, what do you think will happen? And then he said, well, maybe their children cannot come to Canada. And I said, okay. Right? I was so naive at the beginning. And then someone said, no, this designating a military organization as terrorist is making them legitimate targets. That's why we saw the commanders being hit, and no one was talking about it, because it was designated as a terrorist organization. So people from military were not assassinated, but people from the IRGC were assassinated. So every step of the way was happening. So you should not see Justin Trudeau's reaction as like, oh, spur of the moment thing. That was a planned. That was like, all right, right now, pinkwashing operation in practice, like it's happening. All right, let's do this. And what did they do? The first thing the Canadian government did was to sanction the two utmost critics of police brutality inside of Iran. Why is the reason for that? They were the ones who spoke up against, like, why this poor girl was killed. Why did this happen? Canada sanctioned them. Because they were hoping for regime change, and they didn't want any voice from inside to be valid or to have a podium in at an international level. So it was a very deliberate attempt for regime change in Iran. So yeah.
Well, it's good that we opened that subject. It's going to clear up a lot of questions.
Yeah.
Like Mahsa Amini, Allah yarhamah, she died. Regardless, I'm not sure. Were there any final conclusions on? Yeah. Did the government say anything? Oh, she officially died or no?
So there was yes, but I don't know them off the top of my head. I think that I always say that was the most unfortunate event that happened, and the reason why it created that authentic anger, which was at the beginning incredibly beautiful, as I say, we're anti-injustice. So I loved the reaction of people. But the phrase woman, life, freedom was not created by the Iranians. So Iranians wanted, like when they went into the streets, they said, we just want to get rid of mandatory hijab and no morality police, right? And then I was very angry with them. Mahsa Amini was an embodiment of everything that could spur the disintegration of Iran, could legitimize the disintegration of Iran. She was Kurdish, she was Sunni, she was beautifully innocent. We saw her on camera. I don't know if you saw her. She was a picture once, maybe. She was incredibly. She was not a. You know what I mean? Like she was not a person that would shout or anything. So everything sort of like that resonated with a lot of people. The anti-injustice aspect of it, and then 10 days in, I was like, no. So the West co-opted. And they were waiting for something to happen. It's like they were sort of like planning. Arab Spring, for example. Yeah, they were. Yeah, they were waiting for it, and a lot of things didn't spur this, didn't create this reaction, and then this one did, and they're like, now it's time to go. So they sort of played all their cards. So this was a whole operation of regime change in my mind, because pinkwashing is the method of regime change, the American method of regime change. So it happened in Afghanistan in the name of freedom of women, there too, Iraq, the same thing. So yeah. The reason, it's a good subject, Mahsa Amini, the reason is because, like I mentioned, for example, there are a lot of examples of police brutality in the U.S. Yeah. And instead of having a serious conversation about, for example, racism, like regime change, we talk about exactly if there's an issue with any law, regardless of mandatory hijab or whatnot, that's a inside dynamic, and that's something that should be debated inside. And if people want to protest and give their opinions, they should be able to. But at the same time, that doesn't mean that there should be one regime change, or there shouldn't be explosions in the West, basically, like you mentioned, firing the ambassadors and whatnot, preparing for war, for something that's a domestic challenge and that should be resolved domestically in tells you something. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, it tells you something about the whole idea of regime change, which invests very much in an opposition stance that Iranians, according to a historian, I always quote this, it's a classic, they're anti-establishment. They were during the Shah, they were before that. I always say this, I sound like a broken record, but that's important to know, and that's something to work on as an ethical resistance. You need to know what is a family feud and what is not. And if we have survived so far, it's because we've looked at our problems as family feuds. And this pushing of regime change from outside, for me, was very clear after 2 or 3 days, but that's my mission, to make others see ethical resistance never calls for foreign intervention. I gave an example of an egg in one of my talks. It's so stupid to think that by sanctioning or war, that, let's say, this egg is growth for democracy. It's so stupid to crush it in the hope that a chicken will come out. But our imaginations, that's why I think the first question you ask is very important, but our imaginations have been so much colonized. Imaginations about social and political change has been so much colonized that we don't see a problem with this egg approach. You crush it. So yeah. Also,
the fact that the West co-opt this movement is that it prevents people from understanding that regarding specifically mandatory hijab, there's actual live debate in societies, and there's people that I was surprised that their opinion was that they were against mandatory hijab. And like, for example, I was surprised I heard his name, and you can correct me if I'm wrong. Mahmoud Ahmadinejad was against mandatory hijab. Am I wrong?
I have to recuse myself from answering questions about Ahmadinejad because I personally see him as there are things to be seen about him, I hope, in the coming weeks about his problematic issues. We'll see, hopefully. I hope, and this is one of my things to see how. Anyways, but not without even resorting to him, yes, a lot of religious people are against mandatory hijab. They actually had a very good movement inside of Iran after the problems with morality police, and all of them were hijabi Iranians who said, don't do this in our names. So, and I also have to tell you that the West not only co-opts, but invests in creating this sort of like dissent, so pitting people against each other, making the society always remain in anger, not getting to a level of analysis. And then after Mahsa Amini, finally the Iranian broadcasting, the IRIB, invited a lot of people in, like, let's have a dialogue. It's always their modus operandi that when Iran is under a threat that they invite everybody. But yes, a lot of people are against it, and there's a live debate going on.
Exactly, but there's that last point that I don't want to dwell on the mandatory hijab issue, is that at the same time, as much as people have the right to say that they're against mandatory hijab, people should be allowed to have the opinion that they're with mandatory hijab. And I feel like, okay, if my opinion is, if your opinion is valid, and that you're against mandatory hijab, and the way I see the world, the source of my, I wouldn't say knowledge. Is there an issue with the camera? No, we're good. I'm not using the right word, but it's basically in Arabic it's marja, but for example,
preference.
You could say preference. My source, regardless. What I'm trying to say is that the way I see the world is...
So people are not objecting to other people wearing hijab. People were objecting to...
No. I'm saying that people also should be able to have the opinion that they're with mandatory hijab. That's what I'm trying to say.
And
that's why there should be a lively debate, and that it should be sorted out this way. That's all
Yes, I also think that...
They shouldn't be demonized for just having that opinion.
No, but I also think that when we're talking about a government policy, and when the power is in the hands of the person that is, like, the power sides with your opinion, then things become a little bit trickier, right? It's kind of like, I want to impose this on you because my source says this, and then you're like, okay, but you're entitled to your opinion, but you're also imposing your opinion on me.
Hence the democratic debate.
No? Yeah, but I also have to mention that I was reading a pre-Islamic text about a wrestler, and one of the things that they said, we want a revolution because we want Islamic attire to be one of the, like, we want it to be
pre-Islamic?
Pre-revolution.
I had pre-Islamic, then I said
pre-Islamic
wrestler,
revolution. And then he said we don't like this kind of like almost naked attire. So it was one of the goals of the people that did the revolution, I guess. But at this time, it was becoming a national security threat. And the fact that Iran missed that, they missed seeing it as a national security threat, and they kind of like insisted on it. I see it as complicit in the manufacturing of consent for war, and people can look at it in a different way, but I actually think that a very piercing diagnostic of how we got to the place that we got during the woman life freedom movement needs to be mindful of potential pro-Mossad units that continued with this, like, you need to do this. And this is one of the things that we're looking at as activists online, we're looking at how the videos, the cameras that were installed, were they the ones that gave the, geographical information of in many places, like from that perspective. So examinations should be relentless.
Do you think there is examination after the
we're thinking about it, yeah, and we're kind of trying to raise awareness to say you need to look at it again. You need to relook at the hijab mandate that the parliament passed. There are very suspicious clauses there that are idiotic at best, and suspicious of espionage, at worst. So yeah, I think Mossad operation really went deep into, and it's not a conspiracy theory. When someone goes into power, I always say with power, like power is a dynamic concept. If conservatives win, the efforts to infiltrate Iran goes through that venue. If reformists win, it goes through that venue. So it's not like a weird thing, but yeah, I think it's very, very, very. We need to reassess a lot of things going back to women life freedom movement. But I opened a lot of things here. Like I went back, and this is what I call radical, which is exhaustive.
No, it's fine. It's an interesting perspective. All I think is missing here is that you come with your perspective, you bring it to the table, and you think that Iran or the Iranian society should be living this way regarding this subject. And I think that a lot of people in Iran also, and maybe even people in Muslim countries, have their own perspectives and their own source to look at things differently. And I think, I'm not saying that your point of view is not valid. In Arabic, we say tahmish, is that I think that a lot of people in this Muslim world believe that because our source is different than yours, then because it's Eurocentric and your approach is coming from the blue-eyed European, then it means that it's better for us. I'm not saying that you don't have a good point of view.
No, I agree.
I think I'm just saying that my source matters to me, and I'm not talking as Mustafa, I'm talking as a Muslim. And you should be able to respect it as much as I'm trying to have a dialogue here. It's because it's our society, right?
Isn't it noble, though, what the hashtag of collect this garbage of morality police was? It trended because pro-hijab activists trended it. There's something very beautiful in that. It's kind of like, I like it, I wear hijab, but don't cause upset for others if they're not wearing it, right? So, and that actually, I believe that hashtag stopped the woman life freedom for like happening for 2-3 months.
What's the situation now in Iran? Is the morality police still there?
I need to tell you something funny. When I go to Iran, I wear my scarf, and the reason why I do it is because I say, because I don't wear hijab, but I do it because I say I don't want, unless and until it becomes a law through the venue that I vote for inside of Iran. I don't want to not wear it, and people get really upset, but I'm sorry, this is like, I don't want it to be a movement from outside that is dictating it, and it's not. A lot of Iranians don't have hijab, right? I'm not a sociologist, I can't comment on these things very comfortably, but you see inside of Iran, a lot of people are not wearing hijab, and I think, there comes a point, Mustafa, where like in a year or two, where a lot of people might start wearing something again because they don't like seeing, stuff that doesn't represent their sense of integrity, maybe. But it's a very silent understanding right now that, as long as you wear this and you don't wear this, you're good. I'm very happy that we have moved from the stage of not wearing a scarf as being a political statement, because that would have always caused unrest. I'm very happy that now it's just like, I'm not wearing it because I don't want to. I'm happy we're past that stage. And then you see when Israel couldn't get to regime change through there, they sort of like put the masks down and they sort of like killed the commanders.
So are you implying that in Iran now people cannot, if she decides to go out without wearing hijab?
Every 10 women you see, again, my observation was like from 2 months ago, 4 of them, 5 of them don't wear it. Yeah.
Okay, but there's a, like, are you saying not wearing it like you, or like, or for example, they're going, I don't know.
So cover it's not an Islamic thing.
How would you define it?
Modest clothing is a pre-Islamic value in Iran as well.
Okay.
It's not a, and if you, like, chador is historically Iranian. It's not Arab, actually. So modest, it's not outrageous. And for me, it takes me some time to get used to it, like when I go back home. But after a while, you're like, all right, she's not wearing it, she's not wearing it. It's beautiful. It's beautiful. And then, you know what happens, which is beautiful, is that the person that's wearing it is so much respected because they do it by choice. And it's not forced on other people. So you look at them, we're like, you're doing this by choice. So it's different.
No, I live in the West.
Yeah.
I totally understand where you come from.
You see what I mean?
I totally understand. And choice is a beautiful thing.
Yes.
I'm saying that people that have maybe a different approach to it have a valid reason to think this way.
Absolutely.
And I think we should not neglect and ignore their opinion. They're part of the Iranian society or of a Muslim society, and there should be a lively debate.
As long as there's no national security threat, and morality of police vans were becoming a national security threat. And
but are they still there?
Apparently not.
That's why I asked you the question. After Mahsa Amini, I think there has been a reassessment regarding that issue.
Oh, absolutely. And Dr. Zarif also mentioned in the Davos conference that the Iranian government has sort of like has removed the policy, even though it's not formal, but the policy of mandatory hijab has been kind of like put aside because it was a national security threat.
Because it could be used by the Mossad,
because it's been co-opted.
Exactly.
Yeah.
No, I get it.
Do you know that I actually wear hijab, and then I was driving, and then my hijab fell off, and I received a message on my phone that you were spotted without hijab. I was like, all right, I'm driving, I need to save lives, I have to choose between not killing somebody and putting this one back on. But now we're all suspicious of that. Who sends messages of these, especially on the 3rd day of war? How suspicious is it? That's
interesting.
So that's why
3rd day of war.
And then some people were like, let it go already. This will add to the fuel that Netanyahu wants. So that's why I say we need to look at it from with very critical eyes, and not from just our self-interest. My interest is not hijab, but I wear it because I don't want my country to go to war. I wear it because I wanted to, I know they waged a war because of this. So yeah.
Okay. I think we talked both infinitely, and you made your point of view very clear. I just want you to understand my point of view is that there is a big part of Muslim societies that think differently. But your point of it being co-opted and it could become a national security threat is it's a credible point, and I agree with you on that. Like, if that's a national security threat, then it should be definitely analyzed.
And you outsmart the colonizer.
Exactly. You should be outsmarting the colonizer.
You outsmart the colonizer.
We're at point 3, which is manufacturing of consent for war on Iran. And as I was coming here, Trita Parsi was talking on Al Jazeera, and he tweeted something. He said that the Pahlavi brand is useful for the Israelis to parade around because it gives them a veneer of legitimacy for their own war of aggression against Iran. So I was wondering how the Zionists' discourse influence on perceptions of Iran and what they're doing actually inside of Iran to legitimize attacking Iran, making it normal to attack Iran. You mentioned a text message on the 3rd day of the war asking people to wear their hijab properly while they're driving.
My story was different, but the people received that.
I'm saying on the 3rd day of driving, which is a 3rd day of war. As a means of pressure, especially now that we know, especially that Israel, the Zionists, have so much access to our technologies and whatnot, and they control everything, basically. So I was wondering if you could comment on that, if possible.
Yes, and I'm going to say something that I haven't said before. But before that, I have to say kudos to Trita Parsi, who is a Zoroastrian Iranian, and his father had been to jail both during the Shah period and during the Islamic Republic, and yet he is one of the most patriotic voices that we see outside. Beautiful, beautiful.
Swedish American?
I don't know. Swedish American?
Well,
Zoroastrian.
No, Zoroastrian for sure, that I know. I know his father moved to Sweden.
Oh, did he?
But,
okay.
And I'm assuming from his English accent.
Yeah.
Unless he went to an English school like you.
Yeah. So I just admire him. He was so pivotal in making me think differently. I had him as a guest speaker in my class, and I told this to him. The Zionist project, I was thinking yesterday, as a person that has lost sleep in order to be able to like teach and publish and at the same time have public philosophical engagements, debunking Zionist like talking points about Iran. I debunked every single one of them, and last night I was thinking, oh my God, there is a pattern here. It's like Zionists are projecting whatever they are onto the Iranian government, and I'm going to tell you exactly what I mean by that, in the hopes of creating apathy in order so that when regime change efforts happen, people will be not sensitive towards the regime change, and they're more sensitive towards Pahlavi, or they're not sensitive about the deaths that have happened, like the political deaths. So, is that clear? So projecting whatever they are as a settler colonial society and whatever they're doing onto the Iranian government in order to create apathy for when death and destruction happens. It has worked very successfully, I have to say. And that's why I say the video of the piece that Sarlashkar Bagheri gave changed the narrative, and it sort of like brought people out of their numbness and sort of like countered the apathy. Now, what do I mean by these talking points? The mullahs are the occupiers. No, they're not. Mm-hmm. They're not. They're very much from the Iranian society. Do I like them?
But I'm just going to stop you.
Yeah.
And it's very important for me to understand that.
Yeah.
Where does the word mullah come from?
I know.
And it sounds like, for example, okay, Ayatollah.
It's the most populist. It's very populist. Unfortunately, it started by the MEK. We can go into that, but yes, it's the most.
MEK, the Mujahideen.
Yeah. It's a talking point of them. It's the mullah's regime. It's kind of like until you sort of say it, right? But the key point here is the mullahs are the occupiers. Uh-huh. The ruling class is the occupier. No, they're not. And I had to sort of like look at this. And then the other one, let's sanction Iranian sports because there's an apartheid. Mm-hmm. And then you ask them, what apartheid? And like, gender apartheid. No, it doesn't work that way. Mm-hmm. So it's a very clear projection of whatever they're guilty of onto the Iranian. So it's a very very successful cognitive operation, brainwashing operation in order to create apathy. I can't stress this, like the consequence, and that the intended, the desired outcome is to create apathy, right? The second is Afghans are right now with these. Afghans are the Palestinians and Iranians are the Israelis. No, the situation of Afghan immigrants in Iran is horrible, and I'm a fierce advocate for pro-Afghan immigrants. But no, it's not. Mm-hmm. Islamic Republic is the pure evil occupier. You hear this occupier a lot, and again, if you're not, mentally colonized, you're like, what do you mean occupier? Yeah, they're in power. I can't take them down, but they're my people, right? So this kind of like projecting of whatever they are onto the Iranian government, and I sort of like was debunking them one by one. I was like, oh my goodness, there's a pattern here, and it's working. And it's working, unfortunately. So this
Well,
is,
I mean,
yeah.
I'll give you an example where it's working. I mean, I was surprised because I was going to ask you about personal threats, but I mean, then I saw a tweet where somebody wrote to you, Nassim, are you aware that the day after the overthrow, I will shave your head and force you to wash my motorcycle every day in a bikini while you memorize the Israeli national anthem? And I was like, oh my God, like that's so much anger there. There's so much anger. It's awful. Like
when that person, because I don't see everything, I've done a quality filter, so I don't see, because if I want to see it, I'm gonna like, the pressure is crazy. But when I saw like that person who is, has quite a lot of followings, wrote to me, they're such a direct attack. I said, Iran is winning and they're desperate. And I loved it because I was like, because until then they were quiet. They're kind of like, let Israel do the dirty job. And then Iranians responded back and they united. So they're like, I'm going to make you that. And I was like, wow, it's such, and I said, such a picturesque future. So, true. They were not hiding it anymore, which is so fascinating.
I want to continue on the pressure part. I watched a video where you spoke Farsi. You mentioned that they wanted to expel you 10 times from your university because of your stance on Iran.
Yeah.
What was that about?
If you counter, if what I did was I had a talk on pinkwashing, and I said, this is not women's rights movement. This is an attempt.
Mahsa Amini, right?
No. This is like way before, and I think I sort of gave away Mossad operation about Iran a little bit too early. I think that's what good philosophy does, and I'm not taking the credit for myself. When I wanted to give that talk, I want to talk about the harm of sanctions, and I said, okay, how did my life change with philosophy? And then I remembered Charles Mills, my amazing mentor, who passed away a few years ago, and my heart still aches, who was from a Jamaican philosopher. And I remembered Linda Alcoff, and I remembered all the good philosophers, and I said, how can I make this talk, because I don't work on Iran, like my public philosophical engagements is on Iran, but my research is on colonization and time, very abstract stuff. So I said, I'm gonna make this invisible structure of women's rights that is sacred because it's invisible. Just like my mentors, I'm going to bring it down, examine the tenets, and make it visible. And once you make the invisible structure that is sacred visible by showing who's the sponsors, who is benefiting from this, which think tank is behind this, and then all hell broke loose. So it was because of that. So I think I want to take credit by saying I whistle blew the Mossad operation five years ahead. So, and ever since then, up until the end of Women, Life, Freedom, sort of like, fury sort of died down a little bit. It was hell. I didn't back down. I will never back down, even if I have to go through it again. But yes, it's an Israeli thing, canceling you. It's an Israeli thing look at Bob Villain right now. They're like taking pride in sort of, we canceled the tours, to cut your income, to cut your access to honorable income. The income that you have with integrity, let this be a lesson for others if you mess with us. So it's a very
intimidation tactic.
Yeah, and I had very good colleagues who did a lot of thorough research, and then they realized, all right, this is a smear campaign. I owe a lot to them, and how especially a lot of them were Quebecois, so they're new kind of like, all right, there are nuances to resistance, okay, yeah. But it was hell. I went through a lot of hardship.
Okay, let's circle back to patterns of manufacturing consent.
Yeah.
For war on Iran.
Yeah.
You posted a video titled "Peace" on YouTube where you discussed the strategy. You were laughing because you told me Because you told me the story of peace. Yeah, you should tell it. To Basendo.
I was like, I kept posting war, aggression, Israel, and then YouTube didn't allow me. So I was like, peace. And then it allowed me to publish it, like upload it. So
yeah. Give us more details regarding this video. What were you trying to do? What happened before you posted it? Like what were your thoughts exactly?
The reason why I posted, the reason why I paid homage and salute and admiration to the fallen commanders, the assassinated and martyred commanders, was because I wanted to counter the very alienating technique that I told you that Zionists do. They create the sense of apathy. And I said, here, I'm going to say it in English so that you don't have anything to, like, oh, this is Farsi, let's tag the school. This is my stance and I'm standing by it. I wanted to do that, so that's one of the reasons why I did it. And the manufacturing of consent, I talked about it before. Slogans, imported slogans from a Kurdish separatist, I think it was in Turkey, Abdullah Öcalan, woman, life, freedom. Manufacturing consent happens and happened through, as I said, firing the ambassadors, resignations. Let's do resignations in the hope that this sort of like go to the military. Cutting hairs, maintain the sustenance of morality police, the continuation of it, sanctioning the critics, as I told you, the outspoken people who were against it. So this is like the manufacturing of consent. And the most important one is the native informants. People who, because they're anti-injustice, they're duped into thinking, or they're paid to say that regime change is the only option forward. So yeah.
Okay. Then we'll move into the 12-day war. So I want you to tell us, as an Iranian, how did you feel when the night, I think, was it Thursday or Friday?
Yeah.
How did you feel that day? I think it was Friday. It was Friday morning.
I don't know if the camera shows the white hair here. Very bad, very sad. First of all, I couldn't speak. Someone texted me and I was like, how insensitive of you to text me two things. Number one, Israel hit Iran and they assassinated Bagheri, which I really started to get to know and admired. It was terrible. I felt horrible. I couldn't speak for 10 minutes and then PTSD coming back again. And then after 2 days, I said, put all of this anger into creating as much content as you can, because you obviously cannot work on your publications right now. So yeah, it was very bad.
Okay. I also saw that you're deeply moved by an Iranian artistic performance. We call it Latmiya and Ashura, where basically they they sing poetry during the 10 days of mourning of the killing of Imam al-Hussein, or the martyrdom of Imam al-Hussein. Where us Iranian, we're not trying to imitate the European blue-eyed art. It comes back to what you told me about the movies and what the Iranian modern cinema scene looks like.
Yes.
You said this performance touched me because it came from a real place, from the pain of war, martyrdom, and evasion.
Yeah.
And like, I just wanted you to tell us, like, how did you feel? How did you link both events?
To see the informal national anthem of Iran being played and sung by the most national songs being played in the most religious setting was just absolutely something that perhaps Iran is capable of doing, and China perhaps, because these ancient civilizations, they can absorb these and not see it as contradictions. I absolutely loved it. It resonated with us so much. I felt like there's a place for me in those ceremonies. My mom was telling me, like, I goosebumps talking about it. My mom was like, did you hear how they were singing about Iran? And I was like, yeah, it was deeply moving, especially because Ashura is about injustice, but because it's been governmentalized, again, that sense of, whatever, you're taking care of it, I don't need to worry about it, right? And then for them to sort of come in and talk about, because they're still lamenting an injustice, that happened. It was an aggression of a colonizing force, and they sort of resort to nationalistic anthems. It was beautiful. I loved it. I hope we can see this kind of art more.
It was a mix of nationalistic and religious.
It was how Shiite thinking, which I don't practice and I don't observe, I saw how it is absorbing and interpreting global injustices in such a nationalistic way. I loved it.
So for you, it was a display of patriotism.
Through Shiite resistance, like lamentations of Imam Hussein's resistance against injustice. So it was like manifold layers of like resistance all getting together and not actually fitting in very well and organically. It was beautiful. I was telling my friend, like, you know, religious art 1, nationalistic art 0 right now, because they haven't absorbed this, but they already did. It's beautiful, the songs that are making right now, that are being made right now.
You mentioned that basically you were in Iran 2 months ago?
Yes.
Okay, so I'm assuming you have contacts, family, and whatnot. So how's the feeling in Iran after the 12-day war?
It's a very good question. I want to have, as usual, I want to have a little bit of a long introduction to it. These Mossad Persian accounts, what a cheap and weird way and pathetic way to use your country's resources, not your country's, but Palestinians' resources and the American taxpayer money to have all these like common Persian-speaking tweets, Twitter accounts. I mean, it's a clear, again, if this happens, if Russia does this to Canadians, it's a classic case of foreign interference, right? Classic. But no, we don't see it that way. So they keep speaking to the Iranian people. And I cannot hold myself. Sometimes I go and like write to them. But one of the things I wanted to write to them, and I don't know if I did, I don't remember, but it was like, dude, next time, come to me for consultations, because the people that are giving you consultations, they don't know the country well. This is what happens, and this is the answer to your question. We descend. It's our thing. Then we see bodily anguish or corporeal anguish, and we recede, because what matters is for us to survive. And then if we see mass corporeal anguish, sanctions is a different story, but if we see bombs, we unite. And you got it all wrong. I wanted to write to the Mossad, like the Twitter, like, you invested on the first level, which is we descend. And you got it all wrong, all of this operation. And you didn't know that when we are faced with bombs, we unite. Because I'm a child of war, and I remember. And yes, there were a lot of betrayals, incredible, heinous acts that were done by the MEK. But survival is our thing. So, as a dissident, I was one of them, and I knew that we would unite. So I was very clear on that. But this rise of patriotism is beautiful, but for me, it's kind of like, yes. And I don't know if you've noticed, but so many people, so many Iranian dissidents sort of like started saying, what the hell are you doing, that are siding with Israel? Like, come on. It's a foreign entity invading our country. So suddenly things shifted. And I think the reason why they made a mistake and sort of like mistakenly created modes of resistance instead of people giving up is that they look at the world in a very Orientalist perspective. And I think you might actually like this. What do I mean by Orientalism here? Is that you only look at the world from like a frame that you see. Like, for example, Arabs are beautiful belly dancers, right? Iranians are people who have long hair and black eyes and are very beautiful, etc. It's a very particular gaze that you have.
They work on their carpet for 100 years. Yes, exactly.
And then one of the modes of interpretation, which I find hilarious, is that they're like, Iranians, Shiite thought loves martyrdom. The Hassan of Alamut, they all love to be, they want to sacrifice their lives. So we're going to make it to the point that they're sort of like the opposition sacrifices its lives. And I'm like, no, you are mistaking the Iranian government and its following that has a Shiite mentality of martyrdom, and you're imposing that on the opposition that watches Friends and wants to go to coffee shops and doesn't have that ideology. Dude, you're getting this wrong. You're investing on the wrong thing. Yes, you're emptying our brains. Definitely, you're hollowing out our thinking. But you're not going to make regime change through this. It doesn't happen. Martyrdom is a very particular Shiite ideology, and it's mostly the followings of the government. So they're not going to, and then you say, if we make them feel financially frustrated, they're going to go and, commit. And they actually worked on a lot of projects of suicide and wanted to present this and sort of have this domino effect. But no, Iranians are not like that. Iranians, like the opposition is a liberal, non-martyr, it's a very particular group. So I think they made a mistake and they accidentally,
the Iranian society,
by being Orientalist, and they accidentally created a lot of nationalistic patriotism instead.
If you don't mind, can I dissect a bit what you just said? Because initially speaking, when we spoke about the Iranian society, you said that Iranians are by nature rebellious. Did you use that?
Yeah, we dissent.
We dissent.
Yeah.
And dissent is a very Shia thing.
Yes.
Right?
That's true.
Okay.
A way it resonates too, right?
Yeah, exactly. And you insist on the word, and not only here, you mentioned it maybe 2 or 3 times, but also in your videos that I thoroughly watched for this interview.
Thank you.
On this word survival.
Yeah.
And that's a very Shia thing, being a minority
True.
Muslim sect,
I didn't know that, but interesting.
So, yeah, because the ruling majority was always the Sunni world, right? So, don't you think that even though you're implying that Iranian society is very different, but in the subconscious, they're very similar, and that's why the sense of patriotism rose in Iranian society during that 12-day war? And that's why, like you said, for survival's sake, we're going to band together and fight this common enemy?
Yes. So I'm very mindful of not giving sociological commentary because I'm not a sociologist. And the reason why I said we descend is because I sort of like studied that. Oh, my alarm is sorry.
It's okay. Don't worry about it.
But yeah, yes. And I think that the reason why Shiite mentality has resonated with us is because we're anti-justice, but at the same time we're pro-survival.
Anti-justice?
Anti-injustice, sorry. Now they're going to say, oh, this is a Freudian slip. Jesus Christ. But yeah, it's because, I've been talking for 1 hour and a half. Anything is possible from now on. I'm going to make a lot of grammatical mistakes. I always tell my students, English is not my first language. So after an hour and a half, the Cinderella thing is going to, But yeah, I think so. But that's a question for myself and an observation to sort of look for. I can't make comments on it, but it's definitely something to think about. I gave one of the videos I said we have Iranians who are anti-Yazid and at the same time anti-morality police, and it's a beautiful and not at all contradictory idea. So yeah.
Okay, moving on to the part 4, which is Palestine. You did a wonderful interview with Jan Pape, which I suggest everybody to go look at on YouTube.
I haven't posted it anywhere, but thank you for watching. It's public, but I haven't sort of like promoted it.
It's very interesting. You told me that you really worked hard for it for a couple of months.
2 months.
And you told me via text that your mission was to bring Israel's colonialism into the domain of philosophy. What do you mean by that? It's been an hour and a half, but it's really important for us to speak about that.
So we're almost. I hope we're almost done. But
hey, I hope this is not boring.
No, not at all. Not at all. I wrote to Dr. Pape afterwards when the session was over. I said, we did it. We brought this to the domain. I worked very hard to sort of look at the themes and everything. But there's a reason for it. Let me give you a little bit of a backstory to that. I was at a conference sitting next to my very good friends, Jewish friends who were like on the spectrum of liberal Zionists trying to unlearn, and becoming anti-Zionist, very well-intentioned colleagues. And they were talking about, so, how should we bring discussions of colonization into our classes on philosophy and philosophy of education? Because, my field is philosophy of education as well. And I could hear them, and I was too tired to respond. And I knew both of them would attend the session on Dr. Poppe's. So I was like, I'm going to answer you tomorrow. But they were talking about Fanon. Maybe we should bring Fanon. Which book do you think from Fanon? And then and I mentioned it in the interview. I was like, if Fanon was here, he would have told you, I am not, my work is not suitable for this thing. You got to go to Dr. Poppe's work on 10 myths about Israel. And what do I mean by that? It's one of the most philosophically intriguing works, but because he's a historian, it's been seen as a historical book. But if you want to bring Israel's discussions into the domain of philosophy, the first thing you have to do is to tackle the fallacies and tackle the myths that we're being told as acceptable. Right? I have a question for you. When I say fallacies, Mustafa, what comes to your mind? Very abstract stuff. Straw man, ad hominem. These are the things that come to your mind. Well, this is where we got it all wrong in fallacies, and this is my research. Fallacies and dissecting them were supposed to help us liberate our thinking from erroneous thinking that was causing suffering. It caused Socrates to get a death sentence, and they were worried about this. And in the case of Iran and the sanctions, fallacies are causing mass suffering. And what Dr. Poppe did, and what he does in that book, was to create this kind of milieu or a play or trope where, after looking at it, you can never see the Palestine issue as the same. The reasoning liberates you because he takes the time to unpack the fallacies. How about instead of ad hominem, or how about saying the straw man is a fallacy? Let's talk about the fallacy that Palestine was an empty land. Mm-hmm. Let's talk about the fallacy that the Jews were a people without a land, and then Palestine was a land without a people. Right? Let's talk about that. Let's unpack that as a fallacy. Or let's unpack the fact that Zionism is not colonialism. Mm-hmm. So that's what I meant when I said we brought it to the domain of philosophy, because I sort of and decolonial philosophy, because I sort of looked at all the themes that were, recurring in decolonial thought, but using what his knowledge enabled me to see about Palestine and Israel.
And where were you introduced to Jan Pape?
After October 7th.
After October 7th. So I think we'll finish up with that.
Yeah.
As you were born in Iran, stayed there for 26 years, and you came here.
Yeah.
Before October 7th, for Dr. Nassim Noroozi,
yeah.
What was the Palestinian plight for you?
Palestinians suffering, I got introduced to it from a very authentic angle. Obviously, Iranians are, again, alienated towards it because they're like, our money is going to Palestine. I was one of them too. Why is our tax money is going to there? But I was very lucky to have an indigenous director on my Facebook, and then he posted something saying a cause that is close to my heart, and that was the Palestinian struggle. And it was the first time that I could see it as a decolonial and a colonial struggle. So I'm very thankful to the way the authentic way that he introduced it to me. But yes, October 7th was definitely a time where I said, and I would talk about Palestine, but from a very conservative perspective in class. Mm-hmm. But after October 7th, the study became intense.
Well, Dr. Nassim.
The last one.
We will finish up this interview with one of your favorite questions. Is it too late to decolonize?
Oh, I love this question. I didn't know you were going to ask this. This is one of my indigenous students' final paper was on this, and I managed to have it published. I hope wherever you are being very successful in your career. I'm pretty sure about that. Is it too late to decolonize? And his answer was yes. But should we lose hope? No. I think how can we maintain being hopeful in a world where decolonization is too late. I had a phrase in one of my talks, it was Gazer, geopolitically attuned, sense of epistemic responsibility. Check the funding. Check the funding of people that are calling for regime change. It's that simple. That simple. And if there's no funding and they're being presented as independent, be aware of the role that native informants have, people that are selected from a targeted country to say things that you would like to hear in order to create this sort of like white saviorism in you, and then say, all right, we're going to go and do that. Remind them that they're native informants, remind them, somebody reminded me in a different capacity, and that's why I'm here. So a hopeful future and a decolonized, potentially decolonized future, although it's very difficult to say it, is check the funding of whoever is calling for hawkish policies on countries that have a lot of resources and they're geopolitically very important in terms of geopolitical positions. That's how you decolonize your knowledge.
Okay, you decolonize your knowledge, and how about the way I see hope for me is, like Nelson Mandela said, we know too well that our freedom is incomplete without the freedom of the Palestinians. And I believe because everybody's freedom is linked, and if there's one value that's universal, it's freedom. So I think that's why when I sent you the last part, which was about hope, is that I think if one tries to deny someone's freedom, eventually it's just a vicious cycle that's going to continue. The only way to stop that vicious cycle is to put a line in the sand and say, this is where it needs to stop. That's why I say that, yes, for me personally, there's a way to decolonize this world, but we should have the courage to learn from history and to say this is where it needs to stop. And I think October 7th is a lesson for everybody, where we know that this, khalas, in Arabic we say, that's it. This is where we need to stop, and we need to learn from history and not just say, we should have after 100 years. And it comes back to your Jan Pape's interview, where you said that it's very easy to be, I'm not sure if you said decolonized scholar or whatnot, but you could be talking about 200 years ago and saying,
you're going to be receiving accolades.
We shouldn't have done that 200 years ago.
But it's a live colonialism.
But today, try to say this is wrong.
You're doomed. You're doomed. Absolutely, you're doomed. Palestine right now, I have dreams of people who are being burnt in the tents. I have dreams of them telling me, why didn't you do enough? And I'm a person that is trying to do as much as I can. Palestine is a very sad story right now. But I don't know if you've heard Neil Young's song about the setting fire on indigenous people, and says they burnt us in our teepees. And they left a few babies here and there crying around. I don't remember the exact lyrics. It's a live colonialism that we're watching. And the people who are working on decolonization, social justice, if they're not focusing on this, I see them as being complicit. With all due respect that I have to my colleagues, it's unacceptable to be anti-black racist, to be, and not be anti-Zionist and anti-Israeli. Apartheid, genocide. Well, I would like to call it mass murder and live colonialism. I don't have hope. Like, I'm not rosy when Palestine is discussed. But one of my friends during the war, I told him, "Are you hopeful?" And about the end of this war, and he said, "I'm determined." And I really liked that, where he said, because I'm not hopeful, but I'm determined. And if good things happen, then I'm very happy.
Inshallah.
Inshallah.
Thank you for coming in.
Thank you so much for having me, Mustafa. Thank you.